Hello and welcome back to OCD Coded. I'm Erin Brown. I'm a therapist and I have OCD. And my hope with this is to help you learn about how to make your OCD something that's a strength and not something that holds you back in any ways. So today talking about OCD and sensory kind of, I don't even want to say issues, but sensory sensitivity. And that seems redundant as well. But one of the things with it is about how the obsession with it. And I was going to try to kind of illuminate some of the calculations, is what I call them. And that's part of how I try to identify if it's OCD is, does it feel like if I don't do something right now, something bad's going to happen? Does it feel like this urgency, this da 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 da, like, and the OCD, should I not? Am I not? And all the different ways that sensory stuff comes out in OCD. Like some of the past videos have talked about sensory motor OCD, which is the type where you like body sensations feel very intrusive. And so you're very focused on like when you can feel your heartbeat in your ears or swallowing and those kind of things. And how that is this oversensitivity to like brain signals. And so thinking about that, and that's another one of those reminders about how like your brain does not care if you're happy, your brain cares if you're alive, and your brain is not a problem solver device. It's not a memory storage device. It's a signal processor that it takes, like there's neurons all over your body that pick up signals and that they send them to your brain to process them and turn them into thoughts and feelings and stuff like that. And so with OCD, you're getting this overload essentially of sensory information from your neurons and that is hard to decipher. And so it becomes this kind of urgent feeling of I have to decipher these right now or something bad's going to happen. And all of the practices, practicing the pause and being able to kind of slow down and identify that. And I wanted to talk about some of the different ways that it manifests. And one way I've heard, which is technically the just right type of OCD, which is something just doesn't feel right. And so we obsess about that fear that something doesn't feel right until something feels right, but it never feels right. So we just keep obsessing and compulsing about it. But that like touching clothes and like feeling like she had to touch on like certain clothes in a certain way, or like walking through the store, had to touch certain things and like it had to feel a certain way. And that like really what I've heard is that's kind of an underlying thing for a lot of the different types of OCD, whether it's the checking or counting or kind of that idea of I have to turn the light switch on and off a certain amount of times before I leave, but there's also like tapping doorknobs a certain amount of times. And it's that whole thing too of thinking if I just do the X whatever thing so many times, or if I just do this, then it'll eventually feel right. And so much of OCD, like how we talked about in other videos too, with being grief, is that it'll never probably feel just right. Or how do we feel enough just right? That it's not perfect just right. And what that means to each individual person is going to be different. And that's part of what makes OCD so hard to identify. And so other ways that sensory piece really comes up is, I mean, it can be with clothing and tags also, like wanting, and I notice with myself, I really dress so much more for comfort that I just cannot focus if I have tight clothing on or like restrictive clothing. It can be like, it depends, it's very specific, like I've learned now what it is, and I've learned to not try to buy clothes that don't fit that description and force myself or guilt myself into wearing them. And that's been such a thing too, is how do I learn that balance between when do I push myself outside my comfort zone and when do I not? But the clothes thing, it's just like, okay, I know that I'm gonna like it's like I feel like I should be able to wear certain things, and so I buy them and spend this money on them, even though they don't feel good on my body. They don't feel right. But nonetheless, there's like that's a big part of OCD is sometimes you can um like work around it and sometimes you can't. So you can't always avoid the trigger. But if you can, you're more than welcome to. But if you can't, then that's when you can kind of develop or practice ways of sitting in the discomfort of that unknown and just being more aware of what are those thoughts and feelings that come up and can I look at them a little more objectively or non-judgmentally at least and just try to be that observer. And I really like one of the things that really helps me with this too is that like passenger consciousness idea. And I guess it's more spirituality or philosophy perhaps, but that idea that if I think of myself as a passenger in my life, or if I can watch myself and events from a passenger point of view, that not as much that it's happening to me, my ego, but if it's happening, um, can I watch it from this passenger consciousness and be able to see it in this way and then be able to start to decipher those signals differently? And I think that that really helps me to organize it differently in my brain. But again, the whole thing is so much of the trial and error is needed, and OCD has a really hard time with trial and error because it wants to do it perfect from the beginning. It feels like it should know better. That's such a big one with OCD. It's like I should know better, or I should have known this sooner, or whatever different ways that kind of manifests for it. And so when I think about it with the sensory parts, it's, how do we be kind and gentle with ourselves? And just like I said about the other parts, like shaming myself does not work. And if I think this shouldn't be a problem for me is such another common thing for OCD to think like, this shouldn't be this hard and get mad at ourselves about it, but that's only going to make it more hard. And so, what if I just accept, okay, this is hard for me, fine. And I even do it begrudgingly, and it still works as long as I accept it. That acceptance is such a large part of it. And that acceptance doesn't mean I sink to the bottom of the river and I'm like, I live here now, but acceptance is learning to float on the waves, is how I think about that. Once I accept myself as I am, I can change. I think I've said that quite a million times in these videos, but it's also that important to me, and I really try to boil it down to those most efficient and most profoundly true kind of sentences that I can keep returning back to, because it's all those shoulds too, that the doubting of myself, I shouldn't be this way, or am I this way, or am I not, and how we want to feel more secure in ourselves. But OCD feels like if I'm secure, then does that mean I'm egotistical, and how I can think of, it's fine to be proud of myself. If I think I'm better than other people is different than being proud of myself and my achievements. And it's just so hard to get to be where it's like, what are the calculations and what are they not? But when it comes back to the sensory piece, sometimes that can be easier to identify just because it's a little more physical. Well, if it's on the external kind of part of it, but when it's on the internal, and if it's our sensitivity to our internal signals and sensory information, then it becomes challenging. But when I start to, again, kind of observe it non-judgmentally, that okay, like these are signals that are being sent to my brain. This doesn't mean they are truth, but they are real. Like it's a real feeling, like this is the sensory information I'm getting, and this is how my brain is translating it right now. But can I give myself space to think of at least three other options of what it might be? And that's how I do that too, especially if it's something in a social situation or whatnot, where it's like, is this person mad at me? Okay, maybe they're mad at me. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're, um, you know, maybe they're doing something huge that, like maybe they're planning a surprise, or maybe they're getting a promotion. I don't know. I just try to like think of all these different things that besides this one idea that my brain gets really stuck on. And I try and think of that with sensory information too, that okay, like if I get afraid, that what does this mean? Like if I feel like my heart's getting faster, beating faster, then what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? And how it starts to ramp up. And if I can take that pause and be like, okay, this is just information for my signals, my heartbeat beating faster. It could be something bad or it could be something good. And it goes back to how one of the biggest antidotes for OCD is that maybe, maybe not. Maybe, maybe not. And trying to sit in that unknown of that like we can get closer to an answer, but we mostly never get 100% there. And that's part of what the mystery of life is. And that's how I kind of deal with some of that existential anxiety is that's part of the mystery of life is never knowing the full answer. And can I leave like a 10% room on any belief or decision that I have for the unknown to come in, or that I could be wrong, or some new information come in, or whatever it may be, but that like I can be pretty sure and I can get pretty close, but that it's not the goal to get there, to finish, to graduate, to be done. And I feel like that's a big obsession about OCD is if I just do the hard work now, then I won't have to do it later. And it's about trying to switch more from, okay, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we have to kind of go slower along the way or take breaks and rest, give myself a break. And that's actually going to be able to make me do more things and feel more better about myself along the way. So I hope that helps. And I'd love to hear any questions or insights or ways that it's affected you. And I will see you next time. Have a good one.